If you were into skating in the 1980s, you knew Gator. His Vision decks blew up, and his reissues are highly sought-after items. He was the dude we all wanted to be. But his story took a dark turn, and it shocked the whole skate culture. Let's talk about what really went down with Mark Gator Rogowski. California in the 1980s. Skaters were everywhere. A grip of kids were on the streets trying to nail their next trick. It was all neon colors, punk, hip-hop.
Breaking is a memory. Whips.
Metal and attitude. Right in the middle of it all was Gator. This kid turned pro at 14. Yeah, you heard that right. While most of us were waking up at noon and scratching our butts, Gator was already living the dream. His aggressive style made him stand out. By 1987, he was making $2 per deck, which sold 7,000 units every month. Do the math. That's some serious cash, especially for a 20-year-old. But that's not all. Gator also had endorsement deals, which added another $4,000 to $8,000 a month from companies like Vision and GNS. $22,000 a month? Talk about you money. Gator was living large. Huge crowds, wild parties, skate beddies, everywhere he went. But you know how it goes. What goes up must come down. And for Gator, the pressure was building. The cracks were starting to show, even if we couldn't see them yet. When the party's over, skateboarding's decline. The early 90s hit the vert skateboarding world like a wrecking ball. The once booming industry took a nosedive, and pros like Gator found themselves in freefall. Remember those $20,000 monthly checks? Dried up. The wild parties? Over. The adoring fans? Gone. It was a harsh reality check for pro vert riders who'd been living like rock stars since their teens. For Gator, this wasn't just a career setback. It was an identity crisis. He'd been Gator since he was 14. Now, at 24, he was watching his whole world crumble. The transition from skateboarding god to average Joe wasn't going smoothly. The aggro style that once made him a star on the ramps, it started showing up in his personal life, and not in a good way. As the money trickled away, so did Gator's grip on reality. He tried to rebrand himself, even changing his name to Gator Mark Anthony, stating that Rogowski is the name of his absentee father. Maybe he was trying to have a better stage name, since he did some stunt work for the movie Gleaming the Cube. Gator attempted to shift to street skating, but it was like trying to teach an old dog new tricks. The skateboarding world had moved on, and Gator was left behind, feeling like a disposable hero in the community he once ruled. Enter Brandy McLean. She was Gator's girlfriend during his rise to fame, and boy, did she get a front row seat to his downward spiral. Brandy had been introduced to the glitz and glamour of pro skating life through Gator. But as the star faded, she watched him change from the charismatic pro she fell for into someone she barely recognized. Gator's behavior became increasingly erratic. The pressure of maintaining his image, coupled with the financial strain, was taking its toll. He started drinking heavily. His mood swings became more frequent, and he had a short temper. Saying that he walked around with a chip on his shoulder was an understatement. Brandy found herself walking on eggshells, never sure which version of Gator she'd be dealing with from one day to the next. The breaking point came when Brandy decided she'd had enough. She broke things off with Gator, and that's when things really went off the rails. Gator could not handle the rejection on top of everything else. His possessiveness went into overdrive. He started showing up uninvited at Brandy's place, making a scene, threatening her new boyfriend. But it didn't stop there. Gator's behavior escalated to criminal levels. He broke into Brandy's apartment and stole back gifts he'd given her. It was as if he was trying to erase any evidence of their relationship. Then came the threatening phone calls, not just to Brandy, but to her new boyfriend too. The golden boy image wasn't just crumbling, it was being shattered by Gator himself. Brandy was scared of his self-destructive behavior. This wasn't just a bad breakup, it was turning dangerous. She did what many women in her situation are afraid to do. She contacted the police. But even with law enforcement involved, Gator's behavior did not improve. If anything, it seemed to fuel his anger and resentment. The skateboarding community watched in disbelief. This was Gator, the kid who was quite literally on top of the world just a few years earlier. Now he was making headlines for all the wrong reasons. Friends tried to intervene, But Gator was beyond help. He was going through a mental health crisis, fueled by alcohol, drugs, and a desperate need to cling on to his fading fame. As Gator's reputation in the skateboarding world tanked, so did his chances of reviving his career. Sponsors, already wary due to the sport's declining popularity, wanted nothing to do with the has-been with a growing rap sheet. The few remaining fans were turning away, unable to reconcile the Gator they'd idolized with the man he'd become. In just a few short years, Mark Gator Rogowski's story had gone from skateboarding icon to cautionary tale. The fall from grace was spectacular, but it was only the beginning. Gator was careening towards a point of no return, and nobody, not his friends, not his family, not even Gator himself, seemed able to stop it. The point of no return, a tragic crime. March 21st, 1991, a date that would change everything for Gator. It started off like any other day in Carlsbad, California. The sun was shining, the waves were crashing, and skaters were hitting the streets. But for Gator, this day would mark the beginning of the end. Jessica Bergston had just moved to town from Tucson, Arizona. She was a friend of Brandy's, Gator's ex-girlfriend. Back when they all met after a skate competition, Jessica hooked up with Christian Hosoi, while Brandy dated Gator. Gator contacted Jessica after not hanging out with her for a few years. Maybe grab a coffee, catch up on old times. Little did she know she was walking into a storm of rage and resentment that had been brewing for months. Gator and Jessica spent the afternoon together. What exactly happened during those hours, only Gator knows for sure. He did say that after going around town, they went back to his condo to chill, watch movies, smoke some weed, and drink some wine. But as the sun set on Carlsbad that day, Jessica Bergston vanished without a trace. At first, it was just another missing person case. People go missing all the time, right? But as days turned into weeks, the worry grew. Jessica's family and friends were frantic. Her father, however, plastered missing posters all over town when she didn't pick up her phone for a few days. They begged for information on local news channels, but nothing. It was as if Jessica had disappeared into thin air. Then, on April 10th, the grim discovery everyone had been dreading. Some campers were out in Shell Canyon Desert, probably looking forward to a peaceful getaway. Instead, they stumbled upon a nightmare. A heavily decomposed body, later identified as Jessica Bergston. She was hit in the head with a club, a metal automobile anti-theft device. After knocking her with multiple strikes, she was half conscious. Gator handcuffed her, dragged her up to a second-floor bedroom, and raped her while she was shackled to his bed. He then placed her in a surfboard bag to make sure any noises she made weren't heard by his neighbors. He then either strangled or suffocated her to death and drove to the desert, where he buried her corpse in a shallow grave. The skateboarding community was in shock. Rumors started flying. What happened? Who could have done this? And then the bombshell dropped. Gator confessed. Apparently, he first confessed to his spiritual advisor, Augie Constantino, who urged Gator to tell the police. And he did, on April 11th, 1991. Now, you would think a confession would clear things up, but Gator's statement only added to the confusion. He led the police to the crime scene and recounted the details of what happened. But then he said something very chilling. Quote, "Everything you are, I despise. I hate you, and I hate everything that you stand for." End quote. Who was he talking about? Jessica? Brandy? Or was it something deeper? Something about himself or the world he'd been living in? As the details emerged, the story got even darker. Turns out, this wasn't just about Jessica. Gator had been planning to kill Brandy, his ex-girlfriend. But when Jessica hung out with him, Gator's twisted mind saw an opportunity. He saw Jessica as basically Brandy with a different body, but the same personality. After he confessed, he was quoted as saying that Jessica was made from the same mold Brandy was made out of.
You're crazy, man. I'm sorry.
It was a horrific case of misplaced revenge. Gator, consumed by anger and resentment towards Brandy, took it out on an innocent woman who committed the crime of being her best friend, in his eyes. The skateboarding world was left reeling. This wasn't just a fall from grace. This was a nosedive into the darkest depths of human behavior. The golden boy of skateboarding was now a convicted murderer. Gator's trial was a media circus. Journalists who once covered his skateboarding feats were now reporting on his heinous crime. Fans who used to cheer for him in competitions were now watching in horror as he faced justice. The verdict came down hard. Gator was sentenced to 31 years to life, 6 years for forcible rape, and 25 to life for first-degree murder, to be served consecutively. He's been serving his time at Robert J. Donovan Correctional Facility in Otay Mesa, California, a 15-minute drive from the Mexican border. But here's where it gets complicated. Despite the brutality of his crime, Gator still has supporters. Some argue that he's shown genuine remorse over the years. They point to his efforts to better himself in prison, his participation in rehabilitation programs, sympathetic to his bipolar disorder, which was diagnosed by a prison mental health specialist. Others say no amount of remorse can make up for what he did. They argue that Jessica Bergston's life was cut short in the most horrific way, and Gator should spend the rest of his life behind bars. The debate heated up when Gator became eligible for parole. There have been multiple hearings, denials, and reversals. Back in 2020, Governor Gavin Newsom reversed the parole board's decision to release Gator. Newsom's reasoning? He said, quote, "Gator needed a deeper understanding of his crimes," end quote. So, as it stands now, Gator remains in prison. The skateboarding prodigy who once soared above the competition is now confined to a cell. His legacy forever tarnished by one horrific act. Justice and controversy, the aftermath. 31 years to life. That's a long time to think about what you've done. It's the kind of sentence that makes you wonder if there's any coming back from that. But here's where things get really complicated. Fast forward to more recent times, and Gator's eligible for parole. Now, you think that'd be pretty cut and dry, right? A guy commits a horrible crime. He does his time. End of story. But it's not that simple. Nothing ever is. This parole situation is causing a real stir in the skate community. People who used to idolize Gator are now debating whether he deserves a second chance. It's like the whole scene is split down the middle. On one side, you've got folks saying Gator is showing real remorse. They point to his behavior in prison, how he's tried to better himself. Some even argue that he's done everything possible to make amends. One supporter put it like this, quote, "I believe he deserves a second chance. He has done a life sentence," end quote. It's the kind of statement that makes you pause and think about what prison is really for. Is it just punishment, or is it supposed to be about rehabilitation too? But then you've got the other side. These people look at what Gator did, and they say there's no coming back from that. No amount of good behavior or remorse can make up for taking a life. One critic didn't mince words, saying, quote, "I don't care if he was the most famous of famous. There is no forgiveness for what he did to that woman," end quote. Hard to argue with that kind of raw emotion. Speaking of raw emotion, Jessica's father definitely wouldn't be a supporter of his release. Bailiffs were dispatched to protect Gator from him in court, and Jessica's father called him a coward and hoped that he'd, quote, "die 1,000 deaths," end quote. It's not just the skateboarding community that's divided. The legal system seems to be struggling with this one too. Gator's been up for parole multiple times now, and it's been a real back and forth. Back in 2011, they denied him parole. The reason? They said he was an unreasonable risk to society. Fast forward to 2016, same story. Denied again. But then things get interesting. In 2019, the California Board of Parole Hearings actually approved Gator's parole. You'd think that'd be it, right? Gator's getting out. But nope. Remember how Governor Gavin Newsom stepped in and reversed the decision the following year? Now, you might be thinking, how much deeper can you get after 28 years in prison? But Newsom was not convinced. He wanted to see more from Gator before letting him back into society. On June 14, 2022, Gator went before the parole board again. And guess what? They granted him parole. Again. For a moment there, it looked like Gator might actually walk free. But then, like deja vu, Governor Newsom stepped in. Once more, he reversed the decision. It's like watching a high-stakes ping-pong match. Parole board says yes, the governor says no. Back and forth, back and forth. And caught in the middle of all this, Gator himself and the memory of Jessica Bergston. The whole situation raises some pretty heavy questions. How do we balance justice with the possibility of redemption? Can someone who's committed such a horrific crime ever truly make amends? And even if they can, should they be given the chance to rejoin society? There's no easy answer. On one hand, you've got a man who spent nearly 3 decades behind bars. He's not the same person he was when he went in. People change, right? But on the other hand, you've got the undeniable fact of what he did. Jessica Bergston is gone, and nothing can change that. It's a classic case of head versus heart. The logical part of us might say that if someone is truly reformed, they should get a second chance. But then the emotional side kicks in, thinking about the victim and her family. How can you put a time limit on that kind of pain? And let's not forget the impact this has had on the skateboarding world. Gator was once a hero to so many kids. His fall from grace wasn't just personal, it shook an entire community. Some argue that letting him out would send the wrong message. Others say it could be a powerful story of redemption. The truth is, there is no clear-cut right or wrong here. It's all shades of gray. And that's what makes this case so fascinating and so frustrating. It forces us to confront some really uncomfortable questions about justice, forgiveness, and what we believe the purpose of our prison system should be. Reflection, fame, the fall, and the future. So here we are at the end of Gator's wild ride, from skateboarding wunderkind to a convicted murderer. It's a hell of a fall, isn't it? Makes you wonder about the price of fame, especially when it hits you young. One minute you're on top of the world, the next you're behind bars. People are still trying to make sense of it all. How do you stop the next Gator from going off the rails? Now, put yourself in Governor Newsom's shoes. What would you do? Give Mark Gator Rogowski another shot, or keep him in for good? Comment below. Gator's story is a warning to every kid dreaming of fame and fortune. Money can eat you alive if you're not careful. That's gonna do it. Thank you for watching another C.R.U.S.H Unit video. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe so we can bring you more murder documentaries.
Orale, I know the routine.
Peace.